Welcome back everyone. So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. So this is basically something that I've kind of wanted to be doing since I started the channel actually. And it's a more general guide to Apex Arena. So it's more suited for people that are either working on Apex Arena or haven't even bothered trying Apex Arena. So I I didn't really start on this earlier because I wasn't sure how I would go around doing it, because Apex Arena can get kind of technical and situational when you get down to it. So I decided I will start doing the first part for this series, episodes, whatever you want to call it. And basically this video will cover three basic things. So the first one is basically what is Apex Arena actually. So what is it? How do you play it? Why would you want to play it? Then the second thing we're going to cover is how the drafting phase works. The third thing we're going to cover is how turn order and turn priority works for those who are not familiar with the real-time PvP modes. So what is Apex Arena? So like I mentioned earlier, it is a real-time PvP mode, which means that you play against a live opponent. And you unlock this mode at level 60. I don't know if they increased it to level 70 when they increased the level cap, so you unlock it at basically either level 60 or level 70, and it's this shiny blue color button in the middle when you click on the arena tab. So you click onto it and then you see this. So basically there's a ranked mode and there's a casual mode. Casual mode can be played anytime, although in SEA server it's kind of dead. Basically only veterans will be playing casual mode. And ranked modes open at every weekend from 12 to 9 p.m. 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. server time. So you're gonna have to, match that to your local time. So this is for SEA server. For global servers, if there's any global people watching this actually, they have what I think is like 4 slots of 2 to 3 hours each. It's kind of messy. And I think C servers' way of handling the ladder hours is better. So that's ranked and casual mode. So let's go into how to play Apex Arena. So before you can play Apex Arena, you will have to make a box of 15 units, and these 15 units, basically you get to choose from all your available units. You need 15 of them, and then there are also 10 mercenaries that refresh every week. So if you are like a weaker player, you don't have 15 units that you think are properly built, you can pick and choose from these 10 units. And these units are basically units from random players and they can be selected from all the available servers. So if you, let's say, if you only have 14 units, I try to queue casual now, it's not gonna let me queue. It says team formation is incomplete, and then it tells you to edit your team. So yeah, you can only play if you have 15 units selected here. I'm gonna add this unit back to my team. So okay, we've covered how to start playing Apex Arena. So now let's go to why we want to play Apex Arena. So for me, obviously I enjoy this mode a lot. No shit, sir. My content is mostly based around Apex Arena. And I guess for everyone else, the main reason you would want to start playing is because of the weekly rewards. So as you can see here, at Silver 3, you start getting rare enchant gift packs, SSR enchants at Silver 3. And then at Gold 3, you start getting SSR Arena Mastery Stones. So I think Apex Arena is one of the only ways to get Arena Mastery Stones in particular. The only other modes that give it are like PvP events like Auto Chess and Fair Arena. Those are the only modes that will give Arena Stones. And for the SSR Enchant gift packs, this is basically the amount you get every week from the ore shop, the weekly ore shop, if you buy out the enchant packs there, 25 scrolls. So this is 5 times 5, it's also 25 at Silver 3. So it's equal to the amount of weekly scrolls you get from the shop, which is this one. This one's the one I'm talking about. So you get a limit of 5 from here, and then the rest you will have to get through events and stuff. So you get these packs weekly. So it's kind of a lot if you think about it, that you wouldn't get otherwise. Okay, so we've covered the rewards. So let's talk a bit about how the MMR system works here. So if you're completely fresh to Apex Arena, when the ladder opens, I call this the ladder, which is basically rank mode. When it opens, if you are a fresh player, at the start of every new season, you will have to play through 5 calibration games before the game decides your MMR, starting MMR. So I believe for a new player, if you go 5 and 0, you will end up in either Silver 2 or Silver 1. I think it's like you start at 1000 and then you get 100 points for every win. It's something like that, I believe. But basically, you will have to play through those 5 calibration games and then the game gives you a starting MMR. So for bronze tier, basically every win will give you, I think it's like plus 50 or something. And then for every loss, it's just minus 10. So it's very easy to climb in bronze. So for silver, you will get, I think it's plus 30 per win and then also minus 10 per loss. So you only need like higher than 25% win rate in order to climb. And then gold is where it starts getting hard. It's going to be plus 15, minus 15. You will need a more than 50% win rate in order to climb. Oh, okay. The other thing is that your point gain will be also influenced by win streaks. So if you win multiple games in a row, you will get more points per win. So I think in bronze it's going to look like something like plus 50, plus 55, plus 60. At silver it's going to be 30, plus 33, plus 36, something like that for continuous wins or win streaks. And the amount of points you gain or lose will also be determined by if your opponent is of a higher or lower or equal rank. So if, for example, if you are fighting against someone that's higher rank, you will gain more points for wins and you will lose less points for losing. And vice versa, if you're fighting against someone that is lower rank, you will gain less points for wins and you will lose more points for losses. And the last thing to take note is that at Silver 3 and Gold 3, there's this thing the game calls rank protection, which basically means that you can't go lower than these respective scores. So at Gold 3, when you lose, you can't go below 1600, and at Silver 3, you can't go below 1300. It will just be listed as a minus 0. So if you're 1600, you lose a game, you will still be at 1600. You can't go lower. And finally, these weekly rewards is calculated based on the highest rank that you have achieved in the current season. I'm pretty sure they used to mention it somewhere here, but I tried to find it and I couldn't find it. But basically, let's say you have achieved Silver 1 this season, and then you lose like, I don't know, 10 games in a row or something, and you drop down to Silver 2 or even Silver 3. So at the end of each week, you will still get the rewards from the Silver 1 tab. So you don't need to be that worried about losing if you are basically mostly concerned about the weekly rewards. So you can just continue to play on. You don't need to be worried about keeping that score on a Sunday. So that covers the MMR system for Apex Arena. So let's go into game and see what happens when you start an Apex Arena match. So I'm using a replay for this because I can't really be bothered to do a live demo because of like the timer and stuff. So basically you go into a match, it's going to look something like this. You'll be either player 1 or player 2. If it's a ranked game, you won't be able to see your opponent's profile. It'll be grayed out and their name will basically be unknown. You will only be able to see their box of 15 units. So how does the draft work? So basically, to start it off, both players will ban a unit. So player 2 will ban a unit from player 1's box, and then player 1 will do the same and ban a unit from player 2's box. So start things off, both units will be 1 unit down, and then player 1 will get overall first pick. So they will pick the first hero. Then after that, player 2 will ban 2 heroes from player 1's box, and then they will pick 1 hero from their own box. And then this rotates back and forth, alternating. And then you ban 2, pick 1, ban 2, pick 1, so on and so forth until both players have 5 units. So while we are on the topic of drafting, I want to go a little bit more in depth. And basically I'll explain why most people think that player 2 is more advantageous during the draft. And this is not considering like what type of box you're playing. We're not talking about like because of rush, teleports, act against. We're not really talking about that sort of stuff yet. But just purely based off the draft system, why does player 2 have a more advantageous position? So first bands are whatever, doesn't really matter. What really starts mattering is at this point. So player 1 is picking their first unit blind into the opponent. So player 2 hasn't reviewed any of their units yet, and player 1 will have to perform the overall first pick without any of that information. So after this, player 2 will get to ban 2 more units before they have to pick their first unit. So let's create a scenario, a hypothetical scenario. So let's say player 1 picks a DPS as their first pick, and they only have 2 tanks in the box. With this information, you can basically, like, well, let's say your first ban wasn't a tank. Let's say your first ban was a DPS. So now with this information, you can ban 2 of the tanks that are remaining, and you can pick a unit such as Wedem that takes advantage of the fact that the other side does not have any tanks left. So basically you have more information. You are reacting to player 1's pick. And if you look at it, go back to the first pick. So both players are picking from their pool of 14 units left. So it's not like overall first pick has any advantage. So like if you play any other like competitive games like I don't know, Dota League or whatever, in those games overall first pick is valuable because you are picking from a shared pool of units. Whereas in Apex Arena you're not. You're picking from your own pool of units. So this first pick means like there's no advantage of first picking a unit like this. So if you go down the draft phases, you will see that, you know, how do I word this? So let's go to second pick, right? So when player 1 picks their second unit, player 2 has a pool of 11 units to react to this second pick. They have 11 units that they can choose from, and they see 2 units. So do this. But when it's player 1's turn to react to the second pick, they are left with a pool of 8 units. So they are both second picks, but player 2 has more information and also more options to react to. So that's basically why player 2 has the better position during draft phase. Not only do you see more of the opponent's draft, like these picks means that the units are guaranteed to be in the game. There's no running away from it. So you get to see more picks, and you also get more units that you could react to for the equivalent pick phase. So yeah, that's basically it. A bit more complex, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. So I'm gonna skip this, and we're gonna go into the game. So before we even talk about any of the gameplay aspects, I want to cover the map itself. So Apex Arena, I think right now in SCA there are a total of 10 maps. I think in global or even like China servers there's more. So basically all these maps are a total of 18 times 7. 18 in length and 7 in 7? Yeah, 7 in like height or width, whatever you want to call it. So it's 18 times 7, horizontal, vertical. And the starting between each starting position of the teams, there are a total of 10 blocks. So the front column of player 1 and front column of player 2, there are a total of 10 blocks between them. So this is mostly relevant for like super high mobility units, like let's say Divine Boots Rosalia, Spirit Boots Redham, or Balance Blade Clotaire. So you can perform actions before your opponent can even move them out of the way. So there are certain units that can take advantage of the map dimensions like this. And the next thing I want to cover is the terrain on the map. So if you just look at it from here, things can be kind of confusing because on this map, not really, I guess, because like, I don't know, like these things are sand dunes. You can see it mentions on the top right sand dunes, and it gives 10% defense for units that are battling on top of it. But you know, this thing kind of looks like a sand dune too. It looks like, you know, pile of sand, but it's not a sand dune, it's just desert. And whereas for the middle of the map, if you don't pay attention, you might not even notice that this thing is grasslands. Like, it's not that green, it looks a little bit green. This thing looks a bit grayed out, but it's considered grassland. So if you are new to Apex Arena and you want to, you know, study the map a little bit, what you do is basically you click on the top right, you look at this diagram. This is basically a representation of the map, and the different terrains will have different colors. So you can see here, the ones that are light green are grassland, so there's 6 of them in total, and there's 2 forests, the dark green tiles. The sand dunes are gray for whatever reason, I don't know why. Then the pillars are basically rocks, and the starting areas are like a wood kind of terrain, and the brown wood. They're basically indoor terrains, you can see here. Yeah, so basically, if you're not familiar with the map and what terrain is on it, you basically click the top right and you can study the map from here. Of course, you probably shouldn't do this in the actual game itself because there's a time limit. I think I forgot to mention just now during the draft. So basically, there's a timer. You get 20 seconds for each turn, and then there's a total of 90 seconds of reserve time. Let me just go back to it. Forgot to mention it, because it's a replay and there's no timers in a replay. So for every pick and ban that you perform, you will get 20 seconds for each turn, and you have a total of 90 seconds of reserve time that you will start using if you don't pick or ban during those 20 seconds. And if you run out of reserve time, you will, if you are on a ban phase, you will lose out the ban. So you will just skip the ban for your opponent's box. And if you are on a pick phase for your own side, you will just pick a random units that is left from your roster. So that's how it works. Go back to game. So I think in game it's either, I think it's 20 seconds per turn as well, and a total of 300 seconds of reserve time. So yeah, similar to the draft, you get 20 seconds per move, and if you don't move during those 20 seconds, it will start burning time from your reserve time. So just now we were on the topic of terrain, so I just wanna bring up this little graph table. So I yoinked this from like a Discord server. I don't know who's the original source, and basically this table tells you how much movement point, how many movement points each unit move. Okay, let me phrase this properly. So this table basically tells you how much movement points you will consume for each specific type of movement type. So there are 5 movement types in total in the game. So from left to right, I think the naming is kind of shit. So I name it cavalry movement, infantry movement or foot soldier movement, aquatic movement, flyer movement, and terrain master movement. So these are the 5 types. And the terrains that I highlighted in red are basically the ones that are relevant for Apex Arena. I don't think the other terrains show up in Apex Arena yet, at least. So yeah, you can just pause and take a look at this if you want to know more about terrain movement, relevant in PvE as well. So since we are on this topic, I also want to cover at the same time that there's such a thing called movement type priority, which is basically what happens when your hero movement type and your troop movement type don't match. So for example, I'm gonna hide this for now. Let's look at Kyra. So Kyra, her hero movement type is infantry. You actually can't tell from here. This is the overall movement type. So I know that Kyra is a foot type, and sorcerers are a flyer type. You can see here. So what happens when 2 different types of movement are on the same unit? So basically the priority goes from rider or cavalry to aquatic to infantry / foot to terrain master to flyer. so I don't really have a visual representation for this. So let's say that you are a infantry paired with a flyer troop. So basically, infantry movement will have the higher priority, and then your entire unit will be considered infantry movement. So same thing with rider and infantry. So let's say you are an infantry unit with cavalry troops, your movement will be considered cavalry because cavalry is the highest priority out of the 5 types, and your entire unit will be considered a cavalry movement type unit. So yeah, that about covers map and terrain. So also at the start of every turn from turn 2 onwards, there will be this thing called the poison fog that will start appearing at the sides of the map, and it will gradually push you towards the center of the map. So if you end a unit inside a poison fog terrain, they die. So they don't die completely, which means that if you have a revive, like say for example Christian has a revive, you end turn inside poison fog, you will lose 1 life. So for units that don't have revives, you will just die inside the poison fog. This is so that, you know, people are forced to actually play the game eventually. You can't just camp on your side of the map forever. You will gradually start getting pushed towards the center. And on turn 7 onwards, the fog will start appearing on the rows horizontally. And basically it ends up on turn 9, you will be left with 6 tiles in the center. So if you bring up the representation, the map, they will be basically on these 6 tiles. And this happens on the start of turn 9. There will only be 6 tiles left on the map that aren't poison fog. So I'm not going to go too into detail about what that means. So basically there are only 6 tiles that you can stand on after turn 9, and the map gradually shrinks over time. So I just want to get the definition out of the way without going too much into what it actually means. So okay, got map and terrain covered. So the last topic for this video, which is basically turn order and priority. So for those who are not familiar with any of these real-time PvP modes, so unlike your PvE or your auto arena, you don't get to move your entire team before the opponent moves. You will basically take turns moving units. So player 1 will have turn priority. So turn priority is defined as who gets the overall first move during the next turn, and this is decided by who performed the last action during the current turn or previous turn, like depending on how you look at it. So right now, player 1 will always start with turn priority on turn 1, so player 1 gets to move their unit first, and then player 2 will get to move a unit. You can see the unit that has performed actions will have their portrait grayed out. Not portrait, their chibi will be grayed out. So this one has moved and this one has moved, and now it's player 1 turn to move again. And you will basically keep alternating. Player 1 moves, player 2 moves, move 1, you move 1, you move 1, you move 1. And if nothing happens, well, not really nothing happens, because in this example, something obviously happened. But normally, if nothing happens, player 1 will start the next turn. This is what we call by turn priority, because player 2 has performed the last action during the previous turn. So on the start of turn 2, player 1 will perform the first action. So basically, it's just an alternating thing. Like if you move last during turn 1, your opponent will move first during the start of next turn, and vice versa. So going to get a little bit technical here. So how does turn priority change? So player 1 will not always get the first action at the start of turn. So when does that change? So basically, turn priority will change if you kill a unit that hasn't performed their action and they have no summons left for that particular unit, or when you use act against. So in this particular game, I don't have an example, but also there's a third scenario where turn priority changes, is when you kill a unit that spawns a summon. So right now, on top of my head, I can only think of Gizarov and Kurtes. I don't know, I don't recall if there are any other units that does something like that. But for those units in particular, the turn order changes because even though the Gizerov has already moved, if you kill the Gizerov, the summon that Gizerov summons will get a new action for whatever reason. So the summon will be able to perform another action, or rather it's forced to perform another action, which you can use to your advantage. So now that was a more technical explanation, but basically the reasoning behind it is when you kill a unit that hasn't moved, you are basically taking an action away from the opponent, so they have one less action to perform overall. So they are less likely to be the one to perform the final action of a turn. As a result, they will move first next turn. Whereas when you use Act Against on your own team, it's basically the opposite. You are generating an extra action for your own team. So you have an extra action, you are more likely to be the one to be performing the final action of a turn, and therefore your opponent will be the one to perform the first action at the start of next turn. So one of the easiest ways to count who has turn priority is basically this. So just for example, let's say I'm player 1 now. Now it's player 1's turn to move. You will basically count the units that haven't moved on both your and the enemy's team. So now it's player 1's turn. There are a total of 3 units that haven't moved. Christian has already moved, it's grayed out. There's 3 units that haven't moved. And on the opponent's side, there are also 3 units that hasn't moved. So when you have less than or equal to the amount of units that haven't moved compared to your opponent, so now there's 3 here and there's 3 on the opponent's side. This means that you have turn priority, because if you move 1, your opponent move 1, and so on and so forth, you will end up in a scenario where player 2 performs the last action. I feel like I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be, but it's good to know the technicalities of turn priority. So you can see here, Sigma is the one that the overall last move, and then at the start of next turn, player 1 will move. So you count this, so on your turn, you count the number of units. You compare the number of units that haven't moved. You can do this on your opponent's turn, but work out the math yourself. I'm just going to explain it for your turn. So yeah, that's basically that actually. So obviously there's a lot more meaning to like who moves first, who moves last. So just as an example, this game is honestly a really bad example. So let's say each person takes turn to move, right? So at the end of the turn, there's only 1 unit left on each side. So player 1, they can choose to initiate the fight. They go in and attack. Then after that attack, player 2 basically has only 1 unit left in order that can react to player's 1 move. So that move, that unit may or may not be able to counter kill the unit that has initiated. And if it can't, then the next turn starts. Then player 1's unit will either be able to perform a second attack, or they can just retreat. So turn priority is relevant for things like that. And or if it's a very aggressive trade game, sometimes it's very useful to keep in mind who has the overall first move during the next turn. So that basically covers it for turn order and priority. So I made a shitty PowerPoint slide to try and kind of cover the summary for this video. So at the start of the video, we covered overview of Apex Arena. So it basically unlocks at level 60 or 70, I'm not sure which is it now. You need a roster of 15 units in order to play at all. And there are a roster of 10 mercenaries every week that you can select from. They refresh every week. Ranked games happen on weekends at the mentioned time slot. You can play casuals anytime, but chances are the people that play casuals aren't actually casual players. They're mostly veteran players. And this Apex Arena is the main way in order to obtain enchant scrolls and arena stones. So MMR system, well, obviously you gain points for winning and you lose points for losing. At bronze and silver, you gain more than you lose, so you need less of a win ratio in order to gain MMR. And then you can gain more points from win streaks, and your gain loss is, regulated depending on if you're fighting a higher or lower rank opponent. And you have rank protection at silver and gold 3, which is 1300 and 1600 respectively. So the draft phase, 20 seconds for each pick and ban. So both pick and bans you will get 20 seconds each, and then there's a total of 90 seconds of reserve time. So you will start deducting from your reserve time if you burn your 20 seconds per turn. And you will either miss the ban or perform a random pick if your reserve time runs out. Player 2 gets overall first ban, player 1 has to perform overall first pick. And then after that you alternate between banning 2 of your opponent's unit and picking 1 of your own. This alternates. And player 2 overall has the better advantage during draft phase. I'm not gonna explain it fully in the summary. So about the map itself, it is a 18x7 horizontal to vertical map size, and all maps are of the same dimensions, and there are 10 blocks between the starting spawn areas between player 1 and player 2, which are relevant for certain things that can cover that 10 block distance, which means that you can perform actions before your opponent can even react or move out of the way. And whether or not those actions are the correct choices is another question altogether, but they can initiate before you even move out of the way. So if you're unfamiliar with the map and you want to study the terrain, don't do this in a live game because there's a timer in the actual game. But if you're just studying a replay, you're unfamiliar with the map itself, you can click top right and it will bring up a representation of the map itself, and you can look at the terrain that way. Much easier than clicking one by one on the actual map itself. It's covered movement type priority, it's rider to aquatic to infantry / foot to terrain master to flyer. So if your troops and hero movement types don't match, the one that has higher priority will take priority. So if you combine a cavalry troop with an infantry unit or hero, your entire unit will be considered cavalry movement type. Then there's a fog that increases in size every turn. It basically pushes you towards the center. And on turn 9, the center will form, which is the 6 blocks right at the dead center of the map. And turn order and priority, player 1 will get the overall first move, and each player will take turn moving a single unit. And the single unit is bound to their summon, so the summon and the summoner will perform their actions together. You can't split them apart. Turn priority is defined as who gets the overall first move on the next turn, and it is decided by who moved last during the current turn. And player 1 will have turn priority if nothing much happens or if all else remains equal. And this changes if you kill a unit that hasn't moved, or if you use an act again. Basically increases the number of actions that you take, or decreases the number of actions that your opponent takes. That's basically what it boils down to. And if you're not familiar with how to counter turn priority, you don't know who is going to move first on the next turn, you can count this by taking into account of how many units that has not moved on both sides of map, both your ones and your opponent's one. On your turn, if you have more less than or equal to the number of units that your opponent has that hasn't moved, you will have turn priority. If they have more, if you have more units, then they will have turn priority. So yeah, that about covers it for this topic. So for the next episodes or video, I plan to be discussing the different box archetypes, or what you call play styles. And I basically break it down into 4 main styles, which is rush, tankless, tank push, and stall. So I think each playstyle itself is going to take up a whole video's worth of time. So, and I actually have to make proper slides for it, I think, because I can't really explain it through the game itself. So that's going to take quite a bit of time. I don't know when I'm going to get those up, but yeah, basically these will be what I'm covering next in this series. So I hope you all have learned something from this video. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.